given Democratic successes, both legislatively and in terms of things like the Kansas law being so roundly, the ballot to enshrine, to get rid of abortion in the Constitution so roundly defeated, do you think the Democrats, are you willing to give them a little more credit for getting things done? Do you think their midterm prospects have improved? And have you changed your dour outlook overall on both the Democratic prospects in the midterms and the Democrats in general?
I don't really think of anything the Democrats do inspiring cheer within me. They're pretty dour for the entire country. But in terms of the mechanics, what's interesting is that the Politico just handicapped, they did revised handicaps for House and Senate. Before it was for the Senate, I think it was leaning Republican, and now they say it's a toss-up. And they said for the House, it was likely Republican, and now it's leaning Republican. And I think that that's probably fair. I think on the Senate front, I really blame Rick Scott, actually. I think he's been a terrible leader over at the NRSC. So, Dave, we can maybe agree on something.
Well, they spent all this money early on. They spent all this money early on under his leadership, and it went for naught. So now they're running out of money.
Well, they spent it on this terrible texting system where they were supposed to get this huge ROI on texting millions of people and spending tens of millions of dollars on this program. Totally flopped, and they wasted all their money. So they've had to pull back ad buys. And the thing is, he's been so self-centered and trying to promote himself,
of course,
instead of helping these candidates. So
well,
I really
feel
do
about Rick Scott.
Him.
It started when he had that 1.7 billion Medicare fine when he was running Columbia HCA. I mean, ever since that guy way back in the 80s, I've thought very little of him, and he has done nothing as a politician to make me change my views.
Yeah, well, the thing is, he can redeem himself, so I do have hope with that, and I do think they are starting to circle the wagons, and that's a good thing. I think that there is momentum in terms of the economy. That it really, at the end of the day, is still the number one issue. Inflation is terrible still. Gas prices are insanely high still. Crime is very high. So I think that Republicans are, in just history, to have in a midterm election after a presidential year, that the wind is always on the back of the minority party. So I think that Republicans can definitely recover. I think the Senate is very winnable, but I do agree that it's different now compared to 4 months ago, 3 months ago. So we'll see.
Well, and I think a lot of it is, as you had really 10 plus years ago, you had the same thing with these awful candidates, right? Remember Todd, legitimate rape, Aiken, and Christine, I am not a witch, O'Donnell, and Richard, rape is God's will, Murdoch. There was probably, and I can think of 3 other seats that, Sharon Engel in Nevada, and Berg in North Dakota, and Ken Buck in Colorado, these seats that were very winnable and that were squandered. And you're seeing the same, with Herschel Walker or Blake Masters. Woo! Now there's a nut job. I never thought someone could be worse than Peter Thiel. But in terms of his views, I admire Peter Thiel in so many ways, but I've never understood him politically. And then also, I'll tell you, on a side note, whatever happens in Ohio, note to Democrats, Tim Ryan has shown you how you can run a successful race because he's focused on the issues that working class people care about. That's what I've said all along. Where there's very little daylight between Trump voters and Democrats is on kitchen table issues. That's what they talked about in 2018. That's what they won. That's why they won. That's what they didn't talk about in 2020. And that's why, other than Biden's election, it was a terrible year for Democrats. Tim Ryan has not allowed them to control the debate. When they talk about abortion till birth, he rightly says, no, this is a decision that should be made between a doctor and a woman, which is what I agree with. Congress has no business legislating medicine. It's the same thing with that so-called partial birth abortion, which, by the way, was a misnomer. So Democrats, Tim Ryan can show you how to run a race. Despite as awful a candidate as J.D. Vance is, I still think that's an uphill slog because Ohio is becoming more red, but he showed you how it can be done. Your thoughts?
Well, he showed you how to run away from a toxic socialist president like Biden. That's what he's doing. Any chance he
No,
gets,
he's focusing
he throws
on the
Biden
issues
under
that
the
people
bus.
care about. Come on.
Yeah. No, and he bobs and weaves away from Biden. And in fact, he's been asked point blank, would you welcome Biden coming to campaign with you? The answer is no. So yeah, that's really what he's doing.
With
So
him
it's
the other day.
no, he's when you see what he's doing, he is trying to paint himself as a moderate, but in reality, he's not. His voting record speaks for itself. So people, they're not going to be deceived by it, I think, at the end of the day. But
and also the other unpredictable factor is, of course, the president's approval rating. If that typically has been the primary criterion in deciding how well. If you look at the 2 years, and believe it or not, there's only been 3 years. Well, only 2 first midterm elections where the president's party has gained seats. One of them was 2002. Obviously, that was unique because it was after September 11th. The other was 1934 with FDR. Now, the Clinton gained seats in the second midterm election in 1998, but that was because Newt Gingrich and the gang, they overreached on impeachment and people were sick of it. But it's a very hard thing to do. And both Bush and FDR had really good approval ratings because they were dealing with a crisis. So I agree with you. If Biden can get his approval rating above 45%, it's like low 40s now. I think that's the biggest thing that the Democrats can do to improve their tactics.